equal pay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Barbara Kuriger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The dilemma of equal pay is not isolated to New Zealand. It is a global issue and absolutely one that does need to be addressed. There is no denying the significance of this issue and how very real the fact is that bias and perceptions about women in the workforce are a key factor in driving the gender pay gap. The Equal Pay Amendment Bill, does have merit, and the government is sympathetic to the aims of the bill. However, we do not agree that the proposed changes set out by the member who has put this forward will effectively mitigate the issue of pay inequality and therefore cannot support this bill going through the House. Pay equity is the principle that women and men should receive the same remuneration for doing jobs that are different but of equal value. This is distinct from equal pay, which is the same pay for the same job. Pay equity issues can stem from an undervaluation of work predominantly performed by women over time. The bill put forward by the opposition proposes changes that would require employers to provide gender pay gap information to employees on request, so they may be able to identify potential discrimination. However, this is only part of the issue. These differences could also reflect legitimate non-discriminatory factors such as remuneration and time records do not record. So gender is not the sole issue in consideration when determining remuneration points. The bill also poses major privacy risks, and as the opposition has always been against any form of potential privacy breaches, if a business owner in charge of a small business with only half a dozen employees starts passing out this information, then the personal identification of particular employees in this business is likely to be at risk, because it doesn't actually take very much to work out who that employee might be. So it could breach the most basic of privacy codes. Thirdly, the bill proposes an independent reviewer to consider and advise how to mitigate these risks, but the bill resolutely fails to make clear how the reviewer would be appointed and the extent to which they could use this data and what they could do with it. These are greater risks in themselves, and how many independent reviewers would you need to conduct this sort of review? Each and every business. I mean, if you just think about the businesses up and down the country, it would take quite a lot of work to be reviewing this. And again, this bill has no limit on the use of information that's collected. Where does commercial confidentiality fit within this bill's directive? Nowhere in this bill does it explicitly state that a reviewer, employer or employee couldn't disclose the information. So that's unethical. The bane of small businesses that I come across every week in this country is complexity and cost of compliance. This bill, if it were to proceed, would be another layer of red tape. And so people don't mind complying with worthwhile issues, but the administrative nightmares that happen and accompany layer after layer of bureaucracy are what people get turned off by in the first instance. It's purely administrative. Further administrative costs are signalled where the bill requires employees to send wage, time and gender records for each employee to MB for publication. The sort of data is already being collected, and to be frank, this bill actually, what seems nice on the outside, is wrapped up in a pretty bow, but when you actually get into it under the surface, there's a lot of fish hooks. So there's no refined detail. The process is not well thought out in place to ensure that a fair and equitable process would result. The bill's out of touch and it's late to the play because the government's already made legislative changes and initiatives that go towards addressing some of the contributors to the pay gap, to the gender pay gap. Without question, this issue cannot be solved overnight. But this government is actively working to ensure it's being progressed in the appropriate manner, and it is this government delivering tangible solutions that are being felt by women in the workforces right across New Zealand. This government is leading work to reduce the gender pay gap in the public sector and is encouraging employers to address this issue in the private sector. We are not hiding the gender pay gap. We are not pretending it doesn't exist. The State Services Commission recently introduced the annual publication of gender pay statistics for all public service departments. The publication of stats like these that enhances the transparency and helps us figure out where we need to be looking next in order to mitigate the situation. Yes, the stats weren't the best. In fact, some of them are galling. However, the State Services Commission is intent on providing the right information in a timely manner to all agencies to help them understand and address the drivers that the gender pay gap in order to mitigate and reduce the effects of it. So New Zealand has an absolute rock star of a Minister for Women in our Deputy Prime Minister Paula Bennett. Our Minister is an advocate for women. Every day she is out there encouraging, supporting and endorsing women. She takes this portfolio and recognises its utmost importance into all of her other portfolios, including state services and police. The government introduced legislative changes, including extending the right to request flexible working arrangements to all employees and reducing barriers to employment for women looking for a greater work-life balance. And this actually doesn't apply just to women, it applies to men just as well. We also introduced the Keeping in Touch to paid parental leave, provisions for parents taking this leave. And this increases women's access to career development opportunities. The government is also updating the Equal Pay Act to ensure it's better equipped to provide guidance to pay equity claims and can provide a practical and fair process for employees to follow if they feel they're not being paid what their job is worth due to gender discrimination. An exposure of the draft of the Pay Equity Bill has been released for public consultation to ensure that the wording in the legislation is clear and workable for employers and employees, and consultation closes tomorrow on Thursday, the 11th of May. So legislation will be planned to be introduced. The government set up a joint working party on pay equity last year, made up of representatives from unions and business, to come up with a process and set out a set of principles for resolving the pay equity. The Pay Equity Bill is a step towards closing the gender pay gap and ensuring that the female-dominated industries are paid fairly, and it reflects this government's commitment to working for New Zealanders. The Ministry for Women has commissioned research on the causes of the gap for women, which is assisting the Ministry to understand the potential further actions it needs to take to reduce the pay gap for women on different incomes. Research found that 80% of the gender pay gap is unexplained. This shows that factors such as differences in behaviours and choices between men and women are driving the majority of trends in the current national gender pay gap. The Ministry of Women monitors the government's target of 45% women's representation on state sector boards and committees, and Minister Bennett has announced that the government met the target in December 2016. While given this platform, I want to acknowledge out there in the rural and provincial New Zealand, those women out there are working on farms. I would like to acknowledge Hayley Hugendijk, who recently, as last weekend, was the first woman to take out the Farm Manager of the Year at the Dairy Industry Awards. She's 28 years old and she manages a 600-cow property. She's breaking down barriers and she's breaking down ceilings. And the reason I give you that message is because we need to study where these women are coming from, what they're doing, and what are they doing to bridge the gap so that we can actually help all women do it. So it's targeted, it's focused, and Mr. Speaker, I clearly oppose the introduction of this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Poto Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.